All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dungan-Mott Music and Movie Podcast, Revitalized. So today we are back with another brand new episode, and today we're going to be talking about the 1984 album by Kiss, Animalize. So this was released on September 13th, 1984, recorded May through July of 1984, produced by Paul Stanley, associated or associate producer Gene Simmons, and Michael James Jackson, who produced the previous two albums and then the four songs for the Killers compilation. He ends up doing the drums on this record. He produces and records the drums. The 12th studio album and second non makeup album, the first and only album to feature guitarist Mark St. John, the debut of Mr. Bruce Kulick on guitar, albeit uncredited, a progression from the previous couple of albums, while also a transition into the glam and hair metal of the next few albums that they would do. Two singles and two videos were released from this record, and this was actually the biggest selling album for the band since 1979's Dynasty. It was certified platinum by the RIAA, went to number 19 on the Billboard 200. So, yeah, this was a pretty successful record. This was, I believe, maybe the biggest of the 80s run, actually. And, I mean, this album, it's quite an interesting record because, as I said earlier, this is the first and only to feature Mark St. John. So after the ending of the Lick It Up tour and the whole fiasco with Vinnie Vincent, who it was like they fired him during the middle of the tour, but they couldn't find a guitarist that fast, so they hired him back and then fired him again after at the end of the tour. And then they started holding auditions for another guitarist, and I believe like the Creatures tour itself ended in like February or March of 1984, and then they were in the studio in May. So I mean, pretty freaking quick. And then they recorded in July, and this was out September. So I mean, this was a quick, fast-paced recording session. But yeah, I picked this record mainly because it's one that I have been going back to a pretty good bit and listening to. And I got this not too long ago off of Amazon. I actually paid very cheap for this album, like $5.50 or something, and it was brand spanking new. And it's of course the 1996, or was it 97 and 98 remasters. And this album is just one of those that I think it gets a lot more praise than what I think it's really worth. And that's just my opinion. We'll get more into it as we go throughout the record. But I think this album, for the non makeup period, this is a pretty overrated record. And especially with the band, I mean, Paul, he puts this album up on a pedestal, but I think he's really high on this record because of the fact that he actually produced this record and was given the job as producer after Michael James Jackson couldn't do it. And he just took the helm and did this record. And I think for what he did, he really actually did a very good job on this record. But that's just my kind of initial thoughts on the record. I mean, it's kind of, to me, middle of the road for Kiss. And I'll get into kind of what I think in the kind of conclusion later on in the episode. But Stephen, what are your initial thoughts on this record, and how did you discover this album?
Well, my initial thoughts is that it had a different sound when I first, I was just looking through YouTube one day a while back, and before I really knew a whole lot about the history of it and all, but I still don't all the way for that matter. But so basically, I went through some of the albums, and I guess they're kind of in order, on the playlist or whatever on there. But I started looking at some of them, and I punched on this one, and I think Asylum also. I kind of think of these two as in the same kind of realm for whatever reason, and they just kind of sound similar to me, production wise and all that, and songwriting wise. But I clicked on this album and started listening to it, and it sounded a lot different than the stuff that I was used to hearing, like the older stuff. And but anyway, it was different. But I guess during this time period, a lot of bands were going that way, I guess. So I mean, it was just kind of there. I mean, it wasn't nearly as commercial as, say, Crazy Crazy Nights record, but it was going toward that way. And just the way that some of these songs, like for example, Thrills in the Night, you know, that's definitely going that way in my mind. That's just the way I think about it. But that's just an example. But I mean, and two, how I discovered. I mean, that's pretty much how I discovered it, like I said. But I mean, and then um, Devin, he's talked about how about it some, but mostly I just looked it up on YouTube and just saw it on there, and I was like, "What is this?" But anyway, so back to you, Devin.
All righty. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get on into this record with the very first song on here. I've had enough, Into the Fire. So, kind of continuing sound wise from the previous couple of records in terms of an opener, very heavy. And it started out from a line that Eric Carr came up with out of the cold into the fire. And if you listen to the chorus, I mean, it's used there. It was performed live all the way up until, I believe, the middle of the U.S. tour, or like the earlier part of the U.S. tour. There's a lot of bootlegs from the U.K. tour, and it was performed there, and it's in very good quality. And to me, it is a pretty good opener, a cool riff to start everything off. But then I kind of find some fault in this song in terms of the verses and the melody are way too poppy for this kind of heavy, fast opener. And it kind of reminds me of Slow Down by Ozzy that came out the previous year from Bark at the Moon, where that particular song is very heavy musically, but the melody of the song for the verses and the chorus are extremely poppy. And I mean, it could have been a good song, but it's really, really poppy for me. And even, I mean, just the lyrics are extremely poppy sounding as well. And I used to really love this song, but I do kind of find it to be middle of the road, good but not great. And I will say this about the song. When it first goes into the song, it's kind of weak for me, but then as the song progresses, it does get better. And the production on this record as a whole, to me, is really, really good. It's a very polished record. And Paul would go on to do the next record as well, Asylum, and he he just does a fantastic job with the production, and it seems like he really knew what was going on in terms of that. Good guitar solo. It's kind of undervalued in my opinion. I think that Mark St. John doesn't get enough of credit with his guitar sound and the way it was played, which there's a lot of stories about basically Paul sang Mark a lot of the solos on this record because Mark couldn't come up with a lot of the solos himself, and that he couldn't play the same guitar solo twice, and that kind of became a problem. It was kind of like the band picked the wrong guitars, but I think because they were so rushed into making another record so fast, they kind of had to do what they had to do. And I think the guitar solo, while I used to think it was very messy and all over the place, I listened back to it this last time right before we started recording, and I was like, this isn't bad. Like, it's very good, but it's just a lot of kind of the effects and the sound itself is kind of, it's almost has this very, I can't describe, like a flanger sound to it or something like that, but it's a really, really good guitar solo. And then the scream into the falsetto before the last run of the choruses are just fantastic. Paul, I mean, at the top of his game during this time in the 80s. And like I said, it's middle of the road for me. It's not a bad song whatsoever, but it's not one of my favorites on the album. So, Steven, take I've Had Enough, Into the Fire.
All right, so basically, this song is right off, like right off the bat. I think this is a great opener. I will say I like the sequencing of this record for the most part. Um, I've got it on here as I've had enough, just that number one. And I've got wrote on here that it's like not something that's just gonna blow you away or anything like some hit or something on the radio. It's just something that's a good opener for the record, and kind of a good, as we like to say, album track. But you're gonna have those, and you're gonna have some that you never were thought should have been on the record, and you're gonna have some that you thought was gonna be a hit. Which I'm gonna get to later on this record, and all in between, as I like to put on my notes. That's kind of paraphrasing, but anyway, so basically, what I'm trying to get at with that comment is that this record kind of it's an up and down thing throughout. I mean, the production is the same, but the songwriting is just up and down throughout the record. And I mean, I just, if that makes any sense. But and then to add to that, I mean, this is a pretty good song, and production wise, it sounds like not completely commercial, but like I said earlier, it's just kind of, you can tell it's trying to go that way. And one more thing I'll add is that when you said that Paul Stanley also produced Asylum, that makes so much sense to me. Like I could have guessed that before if I had to, just take a wild guess, because for some reason this album and Asylum is in the same realm for me. They're just right neck and neck with each other in my mind, and I think it's because of that, because of the production style. And it seems like that Paul Stanley was pretty much the head of, if not all of it, a good bit of it at this point. And because like you get the typical Gene songs on some of them, but this one, it's like this album is kind of very influenced by Paul, if that makes any sense. But anyway, so back to you, Devin.
All righty. So track number 2 is Heaven's on Fire. So the first single off of the record. And this featured a video. And this is actually the only video performance wise to feature Mark St. John in the band. Now, there is an interview bit that's actually an Easter egg on Kissology 2. So this isn't the only source of video with Mark St. John with the band, but there's stories about like Mark St. John. So kind of a spoiler alert for the ending conclusion. After this record was recorded, he got arthritis super bad, and it lasted almost a year. And that was part of the reasoning that Kiss got rid of him to begin with, was because he just couldn't play, and they had a tour. And that's kind of how Bruce Kulick worked his way into the band, and that he was kind of doomed after that happened as far as being a guitarist in Kiss. And that kind of contributed to the reasoning that they got rid of him, was his arthritis and just not being able to play when they needed him. And I mean, it was nothing, from what I understand, like they didn't stab him in the back or anything like that. But when he got arthritis, they actually sent a limousine to the hospital where he was at to pick him up for this video. And this song itself, I mean, the video and all, the song and the video, it's not really much of a concept. It's just like the band partying in a hotel. And it's a pretty terrible video, to be honest with you. But still, I mean, this song is performed to this day. It did go number 11 on the Billboard Rock charts and number 49 on the Billboard Hot 100. I believe this may have been the highest charting single since maybe I Was Made for Loving You, on as far as like charting wise on any chart. I could be terribly wrong though. And one of the 2 non-makeup songs performed with the original lineup, and I'm talking about Ace and Peter together. I do know that they did play, I believe, Forever, and there may have been another one that they pulled out and played with Peter on that 2003 tour. But the scream at the very beginning of the song was from a warm up Paul was doing, and it was basically kept. So it was kind of almost not really an accident, but it was something that worked. So they kept it, and it became kind of an iconic part of the song. The most simple and straightforward song by far on this record. I like the song, tailor made to be a hit single, a good hook in the chorus and the verses, straight 80s pop rock. And kind of, to me, the way I see it, this is like a modernized take on the old school Kiss formula from the 70s. Short to the point solo, and just overall a short to the point song. So that's pretty much all I have to say. So Stephen, take Heaven's on Fire.
All right, so this one right here is the second best on the record. And I had switched it around on my notes backwards, this one and the last one. But this is actually the one I meant to say. It's the second best on the record, second to the other one, and I'm going to get to that one later. And let's see, Heaven's on Fire. I mean, this is one that kind of sounds to me like that they knew that would go over live, if that makes any sense. And they probably, if I had to guess, played this one prominently throughout the tour. I know they played a couple of these on the video I saw on YouTube, but only a couple, not all of them by any means, and probably for good reason, but we'll get to that later. Heaven's on Fire is a good song, but it's almost like Devin said about the last track. It's like it's trying to be commercial, but like sort of not really heavy, but just kind of toward that way a little bit, if that makes any sense. But it's like it didn't know what it wanted to do, like especially production wise. I mean, if you're gonna go commercial, then kind of go all the way with it. Like it. I mean, the production is more of a. I almost want to say not dry, but like, more like a hard rock sounding production is what I'm trying to say. And it fit the track number one, but this one, it doesn't fit as much in my mind, but it's still a pretty decent song. And this one goes over pretty well live. And it's just a pretty good song. But I tell you, from here on out, it kind of goes downhill for the most part for this record. And unfortunately, so I don't know. I just don't know. So back to you, Devin.
All righty. So then we move to track number 3. So we try to keep this show family friendly. So I'm not even going to say the name of this song. I'm just going to keep it at track number 3. So it's been highly noted that Gene Simmons checked out of the band at this point. He was confused about who he was supposed to be, because I mean, he spent a decade in makeup, so he had this persona that he got behind, and it wasn't until later on in the non-makeup run that he actually kind of put on another persona, kind of this tough guy image. And that's really when it was kind of second generation Gene Simmons. But around this point, like Gene, he was so away from what he used to be and just confused and everything else that he went and became an actor. He went into being an actor. I own a couple of his movies, Runaway and Wanted Dead or Alive. And at the time he was doing Runaway. And so he had shaved his head down, and it was real short. And if you watch the videos from this album, he has a wig on. It's not a bad wig, actually, but it's highly noted that he just wasn't there. And that's kind of the reasoning Paul took over the band as much as he did, and took over production on this record. I mean, he did this album the way he wanted to do it. And Gene just wasn't there, and you can tell in the songwriting. And I mean, with this being the first Gene song off the record, it's very, very prevalent here. And so, yeah, It was performed once during the opening night of the tour. It has never been performed again. It was messed around with during the convention tour. I did see a video of that the other night. The beginning riff to me is very sloppy and lasts way too long. It's just like it doesn't know where to begin with the song itself. And then once it gets into the first verse, it's not too bad, but then it gets pretty bad. It's interesting to hear Paul kind of doing this "oh yeah" after like the chorus or whatever, or the verse and into the chorus or whatever. However, you have to listen to it to hear what I'm talking about. And then the chorus itself to me is not bad. A pretty good first solo, and then lyrically, Gene just has no idea what's going on whatsoever. Like it's like Gene is having a schizophrenic fit with lyrics. And here's just one I picked out of the song that just doesn't make a lick of freaking sense whatsoever. So you cut like a nose despite your face. Oh, babe, I'm going to put you in your place. It's like, okay, it rhymes. That's a start, but just doesn't make a lick of freaking sense. The second solo's good, but overall, this song to me is just a bunch of ideas thrown together. Some parts are not bad, but yeah, it's just a stupid song. And this is exactly what people mean when they say, oh, Gene checked out in the 80s. This is stock Gene, is what the guys from History Science Theater used to say. This is stock Gene. And it's just way too long of a song. It lasts like 4 minutes and something long, and like that. This song should have been like 3 minutes and done, or something like 3:20 and done, instead of like 4 minutes and something. But that's just my opinion. So Steven, take track number 3.
Okay. I mean, basically, I mean, this is just not great overall. But the chorus is good. But the rest is complete and internal, I mean, crap. I mean, this is unacceptable. This is where the album starts going downhill, and I mean downhill. I mean, it is. I mean, like you said, the intro was too long. It went too far and stayed too long, and it never resolved. Basically, I mean, I really just don't know. I mean, seriously. I mean, seriously. But anyway, so I mean, this track, like I mean, like Devin said, they only did it once live, and I mean, I think they honestly should have kept doing it, because they should represent their albums live, but they don't do that because it's crap, and it shows why they don't do that. So, I mean, and then one more point I'd like to make is that this is the one I was talking about when this is the only, really in my mind, the only song that it seemed, maybe that and the last one, but maybe those two that Gene had anything to do with, it seemed like, and the rest of them was all Paul. So anyway, I mean, so I just don't know. Back to you, Devin.
All righty. So then we move to track number 4, and that is Get All You Can Take. So this is Paul's ode to Led Zeppelin. This made the box set for some reason, and evidently Paul loves the song, and that's the reason it made it, I guess. I just don't see it, to be honest. It was performed once on the opening night of the tour. This features Mitch Weissman on additional guitar, and then I put in my notes, not very good. Musically, it's pretty good, but lyrics and melody are just scattered all over the place. It's like it doesn't know where it wants to go. Paul's doing this like scatting during the track, and it just doesn't flow at all. The first Kiss song to feature a really, really hard swear word, and if you listen to it, it's clear as day. And then the song itself, musically and lyrically, kind of reminded me of Rock and Roll Rebel by Ozzy, to where, I mean, it's just kind of bland. It's just a bland rock song. The solo is good on this track, but I've actually heard that it's not Mark St. John playing all of the solo, that it was actually Paul Stanley doing parts of this solo, which if that's the case, I'm very, very impressed with Paul Stanley. And I listened to it and tried to kind of hear, and I did kind of hear somewhat of where it was kind of spliced together, it kind of seemed like. But it was kind of like almost like Mark played the first half of the solo, maybe Paul played the second half or whatever. It's kind of hard to explain unless you're listening to it right in front of you then. But yeah, not a bad solo at all, but that's all I have to say about this song. It's not a good song. Filler album song for sure. So Steven, get all you can take.
No. I mean, no. That's all I put in my notes, just no. Because, I mean, I should just go on this big rant about this song. I'm not going to. But, I mean, number 4, and we're already, like, to the bottom here of the barrel. The barrel of awesomeness. And, but anyway, this song is just not good. And what kind of strikes me with these songs is that if you listen to the riffs, they're literally open chord rock, typical crap. I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, it's just typical. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like you play it open A, open G, open D, or some crap, or A D A. Okay, that's done. That's been done a million times before, which kind of shows me that the songwriting for the majority of this record was done probably within about a couple of weeks, or maybe even a week. Honestly, I mean, throw together, with the exception of a couple of songs, with the exception of Heaven's on Fire and Thrills in the Night. All the rest of them seemed like they were written in about 10 minutes. So, I mean, and two, I can kind of tell that it was different guitar players, sort of. But I mean, this Mark St. John, I guess his name is, this guy. I think that live, Bruce Kulick did these solos a lot better. Like he made these, he basically, what I'm getting at is he played these songs better than the St. John guy, but he was doing the same sort of solo. He was kind of trying to follow along with the same sort of idea, but he was just, you could tell his style is just a little bit different. He's a little bit more of a fluid guitar player, if that makes any sense. And like you said, that some people can't play the same solo twice. To me, that's a good thing. And that's what gets on my nerves about some of these bands is their guitar players, and really anything. They just play the same exact thing every song. And to me, they should actually change it up some. But that's just IMO. But anyway, I just don't know. So back to you, Devin.
All righty. So then we move to track number 5. So the final song on side 1, Lonely is the Hunter. So the debut of Bruce Kulick on guitar, he does play lead guitar on this song. The riff itself is not bad. It's kind of reminiscent of 70s Kiss. But then we get into the song itself. What does any of this mean at all? Lyrically, this is once again Gene having a schizophrenic fit. A terrible song, and I put in my notes terrible with all caps. And he says, girls love money. Well, Gene, you love money too, so don't be talking too much. And then I put just a bad song, so freaking bad. And then toward the middle of it, before the solo, it gets very fast and metal, but that can't save it. And then the lead in to the solo with the whammy bar or whatever, that's really cool. And then a good solo. Bruce, to me, is the best guitarist Kiss ever had. And he could do whatever they needed him to do. He could play the Ace stuff, the Vinny stuff, and, of course, his own stuff and what brief Mark St. John stuff they did live. So, yeah, I mean, just a bad song and just a bad way to close side 1. just slow, meandering, plodding Gene. So Stephen, take Lonely as the Hunter.
Well, that would be my word for this whole record is meander. And I mean, this is just, I mean, freaking stupid. I mean, if this was an ant, I would most definitely crush it. I mean, this is crap. My notes. I mean, they're trying to go all Southern rock on us all of a sudden. The most typical shit I've ever heard in my life. I think they could stand to be a little bit more creative with it. This is one of the main ones where I said, I mean, seriously. I mean, this stuff. I mean, he's playing open chords and calling it a riff. So back to you, Devin.
All right, so we move to the next track, the opener of side 2, Under the Gun. So this was performed live all the way up until the Hot in the Shade tour. It was performed, I believe, all the way up through like the middle of it, and then they dropped it. It went over pretty well live. It was kind of sometimes followed by a Bruce Kulick guitar solo, and this is kind of the typical Fast and Furious Paul song on the record. So it's kind of almost like Danger from Creatures of the Night, and then you had Gimme More off of Lick It Up, and then like the Oath off of what was the Music from the Elder. I'm just had a brain problem there, but yeah, Fast and Furious Paul. This to me is a good return to form for the record. For once, a very strong song. Then good and heavy. I like the heaviness of the song. Good guitar solo and one of the best songs on the record. And this should have opened the album, in my opinion, because I do think it fits much better as an opener. So, Stephen, take Under the Gun.
Okay, so basically, this one I've got a good note here for. And furthermore, this song was complete garbage. I'm looking at all 3 of my cats out here right now. I would not feed this to any of them. I mean, just no. I mean, no. This is unacceptable. I mean, the middle of this album is equivalent to the entirety of 91 Skinner. But here on out, but the album gets better. So back to you, Devin.
So then we move to the next track, While the City Sleeps. So this features Mitch Weissman once again on guitar. To me, the best Gene song on the record. This should have closed the record. I don't know why they didn't choose this one to be the closer for the album. This used to be my favorite song, but it's since changed. And this to me is the only somewhat coherent lyrics by Gene on the entire album. A good solo, and the ending is very reminiscent of War Machine in terms of those like effects. It's like a droning sound at the end of it, and it's very similar to War Machine in that way. So the final song on the record is Murder in High Heels. So this is another song to feature Bruce Kulick. Bruce Kulick says he didn't play all of the lead guitar parts on here. He just played like some ending parts to the song. That was it, though. And this is now Gene's ode to Led Zeppelin, and Gene's trying to be a funk superstar. And just what is this song? This is just okay. And then there's just this real weird. I noticed it the last few times I've listened to this album. It's got this weird droning noise in the back. It's almost like an organ, or it kind of sounds like maybe they caught a car horn blowing outside of the studio just on a loop or something, and they called it in the microphone or something, and it ended up on this recording. But it's just a weird noise. You can barely hear it, but they stop at one point, and it's very noticeable. And then this is terrible. The worst song on the record. Once again, a song where, I mean, Gene's just checked out by this point. Pretty good guitar solo and a terrible way to end the album. And I just put, eh. So, Stephen, take Murder in High Heels.
Stupid song. I mean, no. I mean, that's all I wrote in my notes. Stupid song, comma. I didn't even finish it. So back to you, Devin.
All righty, oh my. So that's the album. So I will get a bit into the tour for this record. So they did a tour for this album from 1984 to 1985. So, I mean, non-stop touring for Kiss during the 80s. And they recorded a live video on this tour, Animalize Live and Uncensored. And they edited that down and then later made it to MTV as a concert special. It's a really good show, a really strong show, a really cool set list. They put some songs off of this album in there, a song off Lick It Up, some Creatures stuff, and then a mixture of some of the older material. And it's a really good concert video, and I don't understand why they've never released it on DVD or Blu-ray. I mean, it would be a really good seller if they did something with it, because it is kind of an acclaimed show from the Kiss fans' viewpoint. And I'd love to have them release like a concert CD or something of that, because I would buy it. And the radio broadcast does float around a lot on Amazon and stuff like that. You can get it on there. I need to pick it up if I could ever find it for a good price. But that tour itself, Mark St. John ends up performing 1.5 shows, and there's a bad audience recording of his one show with the band at Binghamton, New York, and he did pretty decent playing, but by that time I think he was kind of doomed, because they had played with Bruce so much on the tour that it just kind of fell apart, and like they were, okay, Bruce is our guy. Sorry, we should have picked him instead of you. But he has a place in history. I mean, he was the third lead guitarist, but it just kind of took a thing of where they found a drummer right off the bat to replace Peter Criss, but finding one to replace Ace Frehley took some time. And I mean, there's a story of Vinnie Vincent. I mean, he basically landed that gig by default because they couldn't find anyone else to take Ace's place. So, I mean, the tour itself, there's a lot of bootlegs out there. There's a lot of audience recordings, and then a bunch of soundboards, some radio broadcasts and stuff like that. I've heard a bunch of them. There's a bunch on YouTube as well. But yeah, that's the tour pretty much. I mean, nothing really big happened that I know of, other than Bruce Kulick becoming an official member the night of the Animalize Live and Uncensored video. That's the night he became the lead guitarist in Kiss officially. So, yeah, so on to the conclusion for the record. So overall, this to me is one of the weaker non-makeup Kiss albums. It's also one of the weaker Kiss albums in general. I'll probably put this, if I had to rank the non-makeup Kiss albums, probably put this above maybe Carnival of Souls and Hot in the Shade as being my least favorite, because Crazy Nights is actually an album I used to really like and I really hated, but now I've kind of come back around to it. It's not quite as bad as I used to think it was, and I'll probably rank it somewhere in between maybe Hot in the Shade, Carnival of Souls, probably above those two, just in terms of the quality of some of these songs that are just so good. But that's just my opinion. Overall, a 3 out of 5, and very middle of the road for me. It does sound rushed in parts, and I think that is just the big problem. Like, this album was rushed, and they didn't really take a lot of time to flesh a lot of these songs out. And it just isn't up to par with a lot of the previous Kiss albums and kind of the normal standards for the Kiss records at this time. And to me, this album was done better with Asylum. I think Asylum is the much better album of the two, and I think they do this record much better with that one. So, yeah, that's my conclusion. So, Stephen, get into your conclusion for this record.
My conclusion is I wish this album would conclude. Thank you, Devin. Back to you.
My picks of the week, or what was it we said earlier, deep cuts of the week. So mine are going to be UFO Mechanics from 1982. So Really, really good hard rock album from the early 80s. Really, really strong stuff. I've been diving into UFO a little bit here and there. And then my movie pick of the week is going to be music related with Leonard Skinner, Austin City Limits, 1999. So I believe this was released in like '06 or something. And it's from a visit on the Edge of Forever tour to the TV show Austin City Limits. A really, really strong performance. So, yeah, that's it. That is the album review. We hope you all enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe and give us some feedback. So, we'll be back with another episode very, very soon. So, we thank you all for watching and God bless you. Stay free, stay frosty, stay healthy, and everything in between. So, thank you all once again, and we will see you next time.